A judge publicly insults Pam Bondi in the courtroom. Minutes later, she has him handcuffed. What just happened will shock you. Pam Bondi wasn't unfamiliar with pressure. She had spent years in the courtroom tackling some of the nation's toughest legal battles, but today felt different. As she walked into the courtroom of Judge Howard Gates, a man known for his sharp tongue and unpredictable decisions, she knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary hearing. The case before them was a high-profile government ethics violation that had the potential to shake up numerous careers. The defendant was a wealthy developer with strong political connections, accused of siphoning state funds into his private ventures. The evidence was overwhelming, and Bondi had come prepared. But she wasn't prepared for the cold hostility emanating from the bench. Before she could even open her mouth, Judge Gates barely acknowledged her presence. As she approached the plaintiff's table, he slowly flipped through his file, deliberately dragging out the silence in the room. The kind of silence meant to send a message. Finally, without looking up, he spoke. "Miss Bondi, I assume you've come with something of substance today, or should we skip ahead to the part where you waste my time?" A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom, mostly from the defendant's legal team. Bondi ignored them. She had faced far worse. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence will speak for itself," she said calmly. "This case involves the misuse of taxpayer funds, and my job is to present the facts clearly." Judge Gates leaned back in his chair, feigning boredom. Taxpayer funds, right? As if that's never been the basis for a frivolous case. Bondi's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Respectfully, Your Honor, I wouldn't categorize felony corruption charges as frivolous." For a brief moment, their eyes met, his cold, hers unwavering. Before she could continue, he cut her off. "Miss Bondi, spare me the lectures. Just get to the point. I don't have all day for whatever grandstanding you've planned." A murmur spread through the room. This wasn't the behavior of a typical judge. This was personal. Pam took a slow breath and recalibrated. She knew what he was doing. Judge Gates was trying to get her off balance, to make her defensive. But she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. She opened a folder from her table, directing the court's attention to Exhibit A. "Your Honor, I'd like to bring attention to these financial records. They clearly show." Gates interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you always insist on drowning people in paperwork, or is this just your way of compensating?" The room shifted. The defense attorney smirked, and reporters exchanged glances. But Bondi didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that men like Judge Gates thrived on intimidation. The only way to beat them was to never show weakness. She paused for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air. Then, with deliberate calm, she said, "Your Honor, if you prefer to continue making this personal, I'm happy to request a recess to address any professional concerns you may have." It was subtle, not aggressive, but pointed. A clear message that she wouldn't back down. Judge Gates's lips curled. Amusement? Annoyance? It was hard to tell. But he wasn't done with her yet. "I don't have concerns, Miss Bondi. I just know a weak case when I see one," he said, his words sharp. This time, the reaction wasn't just murmurs. It was gasps. Something had shifted. The courtroom had gone from a legal battle to a tense power struggle. Bondi's expression remained steady. "Your Honor, these documents clearly show discrepancies in the defendant's company's funding. They received nearly triple the amount originally approved, and none of it was reflected in the state records." She gestured toward the screen, where the financial data was projected. "Now, if you look here." Gates cut her off again, his voice mocking. "I hate to interrupt, really, I do, but I think we've seen enough numbers for one day." Bondi glanced at him, then back at the screen. He wasn't even trying to hide his disdain now. "Your Honor, with all due respect, these numbers form the foundation of this case." Judge Gates scoffed. "And yet, I fail to see anything that justifies wasting the court's time with this." There it was again. His attempt to dismiss the case as a waste of time before it even began. The room felt tense, almost electric. Bondi tightened her grip on her pen, flipping to the next page in her file. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit a motion to deny." Silence. Gates leaned forward. "Let's be honest, Miss Bondi. This case is based on speculation, a bit of creative accounting, and now you're crying corruption." The defense attorney smiled in agreement. But Bondi stayed focused. "Your Honor, are you refusing to hear my motion before I even state it?" she asked, her voice cool and calm. A brief pause. Then Gates snapped. "I'm refusing to indulge this circus act any longer." The entire room had shifted. Bondi could feel the tension mounting. Eyes darted between her and Gates. The jury, the reporters, even the bailiffs were watching closely. She crossed her arms, her tone calm. You do realize this is a public hearing, correct? The media is here, and every person in this room just witnessed you declare critical financial evidence inadmissible without reason. A muscle in Gates's jaw twitched. That's enough, Miss Bondi. Bondi didn't move, didn't blink. She set the documents down, then turned back to the screen. Then, with cold precision, she clicked a button. The next slide appeared, showing a document obtained through a subpoena. But this time, as Bondi read it aloud, the room fell completely silent. The document in question contained a signature from none other than Judge Gates himself, approving an unauthorized financial transaction. Bondi held the paper up for the court to see, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Your Honor, could you explain why your signature appears on an unauthorized financial transaction involving the defendant? Judge Gates shifted in his seat, his face no longer smug. The silence in the room was deafening. Approach the bench, he said, his voice now low and tense. Bondi hesitated, then walked toward him. As she reached the bench, the courtroom was completely still. He leaned in close, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. I'd strongly advise you to reconsider the path you're taking. Here, Miss Bond. She tilted her head, studying him. Excuse me. Some fights aren't worth having, he whispered. Bondi leaned in slightly. I don't scare easily, Judge Gates. She stepped away, her mind racing. This wasn't just intimidation. It was a warning, a veiled threat masked as judicial authority. She returned to her seat, adjusting her papers as the prosecution team beside her shifted uncomfortably. Bondi didn't react. Not yet. Instead, she faced the judge once more. Your Honor, I'd like to continue presenting my evidence. The judge didn't respond immediately. He let the silence linger, clearly considering his next move. Finally, he spoke, though his tone had changed. Proceed, but keep it brief. Bondi didn't acknowledge the jab. She simply reached for the next file. This document, she said, is a contract signed between the defendant and the city's planning board, outlining the proposed project expenses. You'll see that the total cost listed is just over $2 million. She placed the next document on the projector. However, this is an internal ledger from the defendant's company, showing that the actual funds transferred were nearly double that amount. And then, with a dramatic pause, she placed the final document on the screen. A signature. Judge Gates's face, which had once been filled with smugness, was now unreadable. Bondi let the silence stretch a little longer before asking, would you care to explain why your signature appears on an unauthorized financial transaction? The entire courtroom was electric with tension. Judge Gates shifted in his seat, pressing his fingers together as his knuckles whitened. Bondi didn't wait for a response. She already had him. Subscribe now to learn more.